Arctic air continues to plunge into the United States for the foreseeable future. The pattern remains active. Snow continues to fall across the north, and there are signs that the subtropical jet stream might just be waking up. When you combine all of that together, it could spell winter weather fairly far to the south in places that don't usually see a lot of winter weather, particularly in December. As we head toward the end of the month and time for the holidays, we've got a lot to look at today. We've got a loaded show. Thanks for joining me. We're going to start right here by taking a look again at the northern hemispheric view. This is the European ensemble mean that we are looking at, and you can just see all of these blue colors across the center and eastern portion of the United States. Got a big red EPO block up here and some blocking across Greenland as well. Those are good signals if you want to see a fairly deep push of cold air into the United States. We've got air being loaded up out of Siberia coming across the pole, and that is just sitting in Canada waiting for mechanisms to transport that into the United States, and mechanisms we have. And watch this. As we go on out in time, we'll continue to see this pattern with one Arctic shot after another. Our EPO block just sort of hangs out near and around Alaska, ridging off the west coast. It's kind of a flat ridge, but it allows a northwesterly flow air coming out of Canada, and you see those blues, even greens showing up here in the eastern United States. That is very, very, very cold air. This is in through next Thursday and Friday of next week. Still cold, still Arctic air coming in. Look at this. Look at the streamlines here, the height lines, just coming straight out of the Arctic. There's even a little bit of connection here with these two ridges. And if you get that to set up, folks, we're talking about some brutally cold air entering the United States, and some of the operational models have been hinting at that. Still got a little bit of a blocking signature as we approach next weekend. And then as we go on out in time, the model tends to want to, as we get into the following week, ridge across the United States. Yet again, we've seen this over and over and over and over and over and over, leading to the last several days of all of these models wanting to warm up the United States, putting warmth across the south and keeping the cold air in Canada. This is sort of a positive TNH pattern. I don't buy this because we still have tropical forcing that is favorable, but look at this. This is what I'm talking about. This is 850 temperature anomaly map. Purples are just brutally cold. Greens are very, very cold. These dark blues, they're very, very, very cold. And so you can see as we head on into Monday and Tuesday, look at this, very cold air for this time of year over the eastern United States. We're talking about highs in the 40s on Monday for parts of the southeast. That's just midwinter time temperatures. And there's another cold shot coming in next Thursday, and an even colder shot to follow. Look at all of these pinks and purples working into the United States. And then right after that's when we get the big warm up. Look at that, big reds everywhere. It's still the signal for the warmest air is over the west, the Four Corners region and the Central Plains. I expect that will back west with time as usual, but this is a 360-hour model run. And as we get on out to the last 7 days or so, that's when we start to see the big warm up there. Now, the only fly in the ointment in my mind, and I'm not even sure how big of a fly in the ointment that this is, we've been looking at this, we've been talking about the stratosphere, the polar vortex in the stratosphere. It has split, sort of, and you kind of got an anomaly over here, an anomaly over here, and then it's sort of warm right over here in Alaska where that big EPO block is. You can kind of see the circle here. It's getting a little bit stretched. There's a circle. It's kind of a circle. It's kind of an oval. Looks like an egg, and then you know, you kind of get a stretching like this, and that is good because it keeps the vortex from being all wound up when you get a kind of a stretching like that. And you even kind of, you get on out here toward 78 hours and out beyond that, and I'm out at 88 hours and on out to say 180 hours. This puts us Sunday the 14th. You've kind of got a elongated polar vortex up in the stratosphere with the coldest anomalies here centered over eastern Canada. I think that's good. I think that's a good sign when it's like that. It helps the air underneath it to sort of keeps that connection to the stratosphere, keeps the cold air connection going on there. And over time, the European ensembles want to move it way over here toward England and then recreate a new center and bring it back over toward the western portion of Canada. And if that happens, it could potentially maybe shift that cold air connection a little bit to the west. I don't know that that's really going to make a big deal, but it is something to watch, and it's something to keep our eye on, and sort of consolidates the vortex again. But but it's still weaker than normal. So all of that is a good sign, and I'm not even sure that this is a bad sign necessarily. Some of the other models keep it a little bit back farther to the east. Okay, so, but that is something to watch. We'll keep our eye on that ball and won't lose it. Tropical forcing, the MJO, continues to look pretty good out here. There's the European operational itself. Continues to just meander around in phase 8. We just could not ask for a better solution than that. And here are the European monthlies, or not the monthlies. It shows, I keep calling it the monthlies. It shows for the next month, the extended European. And look at that, just all here in phase 8. Some of the ensemble members take it into phase 7, and some kind of keep it in the circle of death, and some take it over here into phase 1 and 2. Eventually, we'll expect to see this travel over into phase 1 or 2, which are good phases anyway. Keeping phase 8, recall, is a cold phase. It promotes blocking up north, and we're seeing a lot of that right now in step with where the MJO is. And so that is, as long as we continue to see this hang out in phase 8, my expectation is these models will continue to correct colder as we go through time. Now, here is one of the things that I'm watching, and I'm going to show it to you on a different display. This is the Southern Oscillation Index. When this is positive, the atmosphere is in La Nina conditions. It tends to be reflect La Nina conditions, which is sort of a dry pattern across the south and maybe a little bit wetter across the north in the wintertime. As this plunges into negative territory, it reflects a little bit more in terms of how El Nino would present in the atmosphere. That would be more of a tendency for a subtropical jet stream to get its act together. And look what it's doing. This is a 30-day average that we're looking at. This has come down, down, down since middle November, and it is still going down to, here is 2. So we're still in positive values from a 30-day average. But if you look at the table here, all of the daily contributors to that average have been negative of late. We've seen some pretty strong negative values too. So as this transitions later into the month and averages out into negative territory, that southern jet stream just might start waking up. And when that happens, we're going to get energy fed into this cold pattern, should the cold pattern continue, and it looks like it will. And so places in the south, the southeast, the south central portion of the country, the mid-Atlantic, we could start to see some legitimate bona fide storms start to emerge out of this pattern that would affect those areas as opposed to this dry northwesterly flow. So I wanted to show you that. That's encouraging to me, and we're going to continue to watch that. Now, this is our upper level or mid-level energy map, and we look at this to understand where there might be precipitation at the surface. Here's the European showing as we head on into, we'll get it centered here. Here's our next weather maker for parts of the we'll call it the southern mid-Atlantic, southeast area here, upper southeast. See that little kink here, the bright colors? Watch that as we go on through the next day, 24 hours. We get on it here towards 6Z on Monday and head toward Monday morning. This area is approaching the southeast. You see these little kinks in the lines? Out ahead of that's where you get lift. Unfortunately, this is not all that strong, but it is going to generate some precipitation. Temperatures are going to be marginal until you get up into Virginia. So heavier precipitation rates promote stronger evaporative cooling. You've got a high pressure sitting up here in the north, and it is going to be pumping in very cold and dry air. And as that dry air filters in as the precipitation is falling, it's going to promote evaporational cooling. You're going to see the surface temperatures come out of the upper and mid 30s, into southern Virginia, into northern North Carolina, into the Piedmont, and start to see potentially that some of that rain turn over to snow, depending on how much cooling we get and how that is dependent on precipitation rates. If they're very light, it's going to be hard to get a lot of snow in North Carolina. If it's very heavy, you could see a few bursts that add up a little bit more so. So there's our flow coming out of the north. Look at these wind barbs, very strong winds coming out of the north. You see this northwest. This is just a northwesterly flow, nothing getting involved from the Gulf, so we don't have any big storms to worry about. And these pockets of energy, you can see these bright colors and kinks in the lines here. Just move through, bringing in a cold shot. There's a lobe of the polar vortex coming through. Look at that. It's a tropospheric polar vortex setting up there in southeast Canada. Swings through the northeast, going to be bringing some very cold air. Here comes another lobe of it. And as we go on out through next weekend, that flow just remains out of the northwest. So high temperatures you can expect up along and north of here, high temperatures and low temperatures to be running below average for the foreseeable future. And then after this is when the model starts to kind of want to warm things up. If you take a look here at the precipitation as we go on out here, let me back this up. There is a little bit of snow here in Virginia. You could see a couple of inches up there, maybe 2 or 3, 4 inches in spots where it comes down heavy enough. And then not a lot in North Carolina, I'm afraid. Another little system working through the Great Lakes as, by the way, there's high pressure kind of dominating first part of the week up in Northeast. Another high pressure out here in the Four Corners region, kind of shutting off precipitation there. Another little system works through the Great Lakes Tuesday evening into Wednesday. You get a little snow shower activity overnight Tuesday into Wednesday morning with another system hot on its heels. This one's a little bit stronger. Another clipper system bringing some rain, snow to the north of track up into the Great Lakes, northern Wisconsin, UP and Michigan. And then it goes on into Canada, rain changing or snow changing to rain up here in New England, and another system there. Meanwhile, the west, the Pacific Northwest, is getting pummeled with heavy rain through the week. Eventually, as we get toward the end of the week, that should abate. Look at this big 1050 Arctic high dropping out of Canada. Snow along that boundary, and a little systems just continuing to move along the Arctic front that's setting up and bisecting the nation here. And highs dropping out of Canada, and in no hurry to do so. It's just sort of slowly dropping out. But you see these systems just continue to roll across the north, bringing rain to the Pacific Northwest and snow across the northern tier, kind of quick hitting. So no big storms, fair weather and dry across much of the south. And look down here to Florida, southern tier, maybe a few showers from time to time, but no big storm systems in California, the Four Corners region. No getting, not looking any more snow through the next 6 days, really appreciably in any of those areas. And if we take a look at the total snowfall, you can see the Cascades, northern Cascades up into the northern Rockies. That's where the bulk of the snow is going to fall. So a couple of feet could fall up there, and then along the track and north of those clippers where they come out of Canada and track across the northern tier, maybe just a little bit of snow with this first system coming through Virginia as we get on into the overnight hours tonight and head in toward tomorrow to start our work week. And up here in the lee of the lakes, as we get that northwesterly flow coming across those lakes, I told you we're going to have a big lake effect snow season, and this looks to be the case with, maybe even a foot or more in some of these lake effect snow areas where those banding or for those snow bands set up. Here's your satellite image, and it shows a lot of cloud cover out here, kind of a front that's stalled along the southeast, and then fog is the big story, and some freezing fog up here in the lower mid-Atlantic, but clouds moving through the northeast. Not so bad up here in the Great Lakes and Midwest, but more cloud cover coming in. As you can see, that sort of atmospheric river pointed right at the Pacific Northwest. It's going to be rainy up there, and if we take a look at the alerts map, there are all your fog advisories. The whole entire southern tier of the country, almost over here in the south, is looking at fog and freezing fog from Tennessee over to northern North Carolina into Virginia, the Delmarva region, and really nothing else beyond that except for flood watches up in the Pacific Northwest, where you can see a lot of rain, and we'll look at the rain totals. Landslides are a possibility. High wind watches are up here in Montana. As a matter of fact, if you take a look at this wind table, heading into Monday evening, winds are going to pick up from Bozeman, Browning, and over into Great Falls and Lewistown, places like that. Look at this, gusting in Browning, 60 miles per hour by 11 p.m. And that wind just hangs on overnight, finally starts to back off by Tuesday afternoon, but you can see 60, 54 here in Browning, going down to 44 by 11. These are just the wind gusts, so watch out for strong winds in those areas here in Bozeman, 32, 34, going down finally by Tuesday evening. We're kind of getting out of the winds, but Tuesday, overnight Monday into Tuesday, winds will be picking up through the day Monday. It's going to be very, very windy for Monday and Tuesday. So there we go. And as we look on into the Pacific Northwest and just run this out, Sunday afternoon, raining through Monday, raining through Tuesday, and then the totals really ratchet up as those systems just continually move in through the week. Get a little bit of a reprieve, maybe Tuesday evening into the overnight hours, and head on in toward Wednesday morning, and just more and more rain through Thursday. And then we finally start to back that off a little bit. But look at some of these areas out here in the Cascades and the Olympics and coastal range. You are looking at rainfall totals in excess of a foot, okay? Some of this will be snow through the week, but a lot of it's going to be rain. So look for landslides, river flooding, urban flooding. Got a lot of flooding going on, my friends, out there. So be careful, be mindful of that, be prepared as you're driving around. Taking a look here at the NAM, focusing back to the southeast for this upcoming winter storm event, you can see as we head out, look at this. This is hour 27, so this is overnight tonight as we approach tomorrow morning at 7 a.m. We're looking at, this is about 4 or 5 a.m. in the morning. And look at this. Temperatures running well above freezing for much of the area. Now we're talking about 33, 34, 35, 37, depending on where you are, but still above freezing. And high pressure is going to be transmitting in cooler and drier air as the precipitation rolls in. So watch this as we go on in toward 7 a.m. Monday. We're starting to see snow break out in the northern mountains of North Carolina, into Virginia, West Virginia, Kentucky. You're already seeing some light snow up there. And then a little bit of a heavier snow band sort of sets up, of course, across the northern triad up toward Danville, and starting to get in toward Richmond and Norfolk, and across the border there's where we're really expecting to see that sort of set up, and then get a little bit of a break in the precipitation. It doesn't come down all that heavily for too long, and so you get a little bit of a burst of snow, and then you get a coastal system that starts to take over, and it could interact with this upper level feature to enhance the precipitation, maybe over here in the northern coastal plain. Some of the models are kind of showing that, but my expectation is you want to see flakes, you kind of got to be in this area here up into northern Virginia, and then maybe this is probably too far east here, but anywhere in this area is where the best chance, in my opinion, of seeing flakes, accumulating snow. I'm going to leave that to the northern mountains and across the northern border, parts of the northern border counties here and up into Virginia. So that's what I'm looking at in terms of any accumulating snow, and we're not looking at a lot. This is kind of like the last system. Several, we could have several places that pick up 3 or 4 inches, but really not widespread amounts to that nature. Maybe 1 to 2 up here in Virginia, maybe 2 to 3 in some spots, and then across North Carolina, not looking at much more than a dusting until you get to the mountains. And here are those temperatures. Look at this. So we're still, by the time we get into mid-morning around noonday, looking at temperatures still in the 30s in North Carolina as the precipitation is falling, kind of winding down. And then finally we get, by the end of the day, start to see that dry air and cool air from the north filter in by the time the precipitation is winding down. So unfortunately, it doesn't look like another big event. There's your snowfall accumulation. I'd cut this back some in North Carolina, showing 1 inch in some of these areas, but I'd probably go 1/2 inch along the border, maybe, and then 1 to 2 up here in Virginia till you get to the mountains, and then maybe see 2 to 3, 4 in spots in the northern mountains of North Carolina too. So that's that storm system there. High temperatures over the next couple of days, looking at very much below normal, single digits up here today, Sunday, highs across the south in the 40s, 50s, and even 60s across the south. And then beyond that, looking at temperatures tomorrow in the 40s across the upper south, and again, warm across the south, and then very cool across the north, not getting out of the 30s, even 20s and teens up into New England. And then warms up a little bit on a Wednesday ahead of another Arctic plunge. Overnight lows below 0 for a good portion of the upper Midwest, Great Lakes, Northeast, and cool below that, and warm in the Southeast, relatively speaking, and very warm here in Florida. Looking at lows Tuesday morning, very, very cold, even potentially into the teens in northern North Carolina, and below freezing across much of the south and central portion of the country, and below 0 up in the Northwest. And then there are your lows the following day, wedging going on east of the Alps, keeping us below freezing. And here comes that next surge of Arctic air out of Canada, keeping us below 0 up here in the Dakotas and northern plains. So there you have it, my friends. National Weather Service, or the Climate Prediction Center. Very, very cold in the east, warm in the west for the 6 to 10 day, and 8 to 14 day doesn't get a lot better. So we'll keep our eyes on what happens after that, but very cold in the north, east, back to the central portion of the country where we find a signal for average temperatures, and then above average out west. And that's what we're looking at in terms of weather. We did have one solar flare. We've been looking for solar flare. We got some sunspots going on. This was a pretty big one, went up to X class almost. And that will, as a matter of fact, if we take a look here at the coronagraph, you can actually see the blast. There it is. So a CME came off here, but it doesn't look like it's all that massive. We'll see what happens when it hits the magnetosphere in a couple of days. But we did have a solar flare. We'll look for more of those. We had an earthquake as well. Look at this. Earthquake in Alaska, 7.0. There was a 6.0. Not a lot of aftershock aftershocks after that. And now we have a 7.0 going off up here. So I don't know if anybody felt it. If anybody's watching from this area, it looks kind of remote, but if anybody's watching from there, let me know if you felt it. There is the big sunspot that we've been watching. Look at that. Positive, negative, positive. So these charges are kind of intermixed and still have an opportunity to see more solar flaring, which we will continue to watch. And there's your SOI headed down again, which could be good news for the pattern of waking up across the south, getting us some moisture to go with some of this cold weather. We'll keep our eyes on it. That is the show for today, my friends. Subscribe to the channel and leave a comment. If there's anything I can be a prayer about, please let me know. Like the video and ask any questions you want. I'll read and respond to all of those. In the meantime, I hope you all have a wonderful Sunday, and we'll see you back tomorrow for another episode of Cold Rain's Weather World. Take care, everybody. Have a great day. God bless.